The Enneagram. We can turn now to the study of a diagram known as the Enneagram or 9 diagram, which is peculiar to this teaching and was found nowhere else until adapted into modern use by motivational speakers as the 9 types. When first presented by Gurdjieff, he observed that several things could be found in ancient systems of esoteric teaching, but not the Enneagram. In this regard he said that although several things in this work could be traced in fragments remaining of other systems, there was no proper organization and arrangement of them, and the dependence of one thing upon another could not be seen. All the parts of the system are connected together in their right order, to form an organic whole, a living organism. Humanity and the universe are taken together. The teaching about mankind is related to the universe, whose progeny we are, and what exists in us is shown to exist in the universe. The significance of evolving being and the significance of an evolving universe, the laws in man and in the universe are taken together as inseparable. In speaking of the Enneagram, Gurdjieff noted that it formulated the whole of this teaching, and that the more one could read its meaning, the more deeply they understood the work. On one occasion, when asked what it was all about, Gurdjieff replied that it represents the union of the law of 3, or law of the Trinity, as well as the law of 7, or law of the octave. Reminding ourselves then that the law of triad states that in every manifestation 3 forces must take part, one active, another passive and a neutralizing element which balances the duality, for otherwise there could be no action, only an endless cycle of repetition. The serpent biting its own tail. That these are the creative forces which manifest the different orders of worlds in a descending scale, increasing the number of laws as they duplicate themselves. Remember too that a second law exists, the law of 7, which relates to the order of manifestation. If there be a creative force, there must also be order in that creation, otherwise all would be chaos. The interaction of these two laws in such a way that one does not hinder or stifle the other exists, so that all possibilities are attained, and is represented by the Enneagram. However, in this early stage one can only expect a first reading of it. Its construction is as illustrated, a circle, divided into 9 equal parts. The number 7 is then divided into 1, giving the result 1, 4, 2, 8, 5 and 7 as a recurring period. Lines are drawn connecting these numbers, e.g. 1 to 4 and so on. Several things can be noted at this point, namely that the diagram is symmetrical. Second, that 3 numbers are left out, 3, 6 and 9, which are all multiples of 3. Lastly, notice that the lines intersect. One crossing point is exactly at the midline, the other 2 are lateral and equidistant from it. Indicating then by arrows, the directions represented by these lines. The starting point of the Enneagram is the figure 1, or ray, because the Enneagram is a moving diagram, representing the movement of things in 2 ways. Starting from 1, there is a movement to 4 along the line 1, 4. Then from 4 to 2, across the area where 3 should occur but is missing. Then from 2 a movement goes right across to 8, down to 5 and then across the area where 6 should be, to 7. The movement then returns right across the figure to 1. But in so doing crosses the line to 8. This is one movement. The second movement is outside on the circumference, from 1 to 2 to 4 to 5 to 7, and then to 8. Set then alongside the number 1, the note ray, and alongside 2, the note mi, then alongside 4, the note fa. This will be sufficient for the moment in order to see the 2 movements indicated. We can see there is a movement within the Enneagram from 1 to 4, and then to 2, that is, 1, 4, 2. Then there is a second possible movement by way of the circumference, from 1 to 2 and to 4. That is 1, 2, 4. Placing then the remainder of the octave notes around the circumference, we end with do at the top point. Indicating the possible motion on the circumference from point ray to point mi, to fa, to so and so on, by curved arrows, rotating in a clockwise movement. The other crisscross movements taking place within the Enneagram are illustrated by 6 arrows, 1 on each of the 6 lines joining the figures along the circumference, in the order of 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, and 7. A number obtained by dividing 7 into 1. Reflecting then on the diagram, unless we grasp something of its mystery, we will take it as we take everything else, on face value. The diagram, however, should fall upon the higher parts of centers. When we feel something is extraordinary, strange, and intriguing, it means that it falls on the higher divisions of centers, which is where all this work should fall. Consider here one of the great teachings of the work. This work does not teach that we live in a dying, but an evolving universe, where everything is growing in its own time and scale. The moon, our Earth, and the sun are all growing in colossal periods of time, when compared with our human lifetime and scale. Everything created is trying to reach its creator, so let's make an apparently trivial but legitimate comparison. The universe, starting from unity, is stretched out like a piece of elastic. It seeks to return to source, to eliminate the tension. A great deal could be noted here about the chemical table of elements and their various tendencies to combine with one another in order to reach equilibrium. The ray of creation represents the absolute as 1, and all levels of creation proceeding from it as numbers, namely 3, 6, 12, and so on. In the esoteric school of Pythagoras it was said that all things can be represented by numbers, a matrix. Consider the relationship of numbers. We can multiply or divide them. What does division mean? Let's suppose that the number 3 desires to return into 1. Imagine it striving to pass into 1, which is absolute unity. Mathematically, this is represented as 1 being divided by 3. Then if 3 tries to pass into 1, so as to be absorbed in it, and all of creation seeks to return to its source, to be absorbed by it, so then what happens? Divide 3 into 1. 3 into 1 goes 0.3 times, that is into 10, but leaves 1 over. Again it goes 3 times and leaves 1 over. So 3 into 1 is equal to 0.3 recurring endlessly. Then look at the whole ray taken as 7 notes, trying to find resolution and peace. Passing into absolute unity as 7 into 1. 7 into 10 goes 1, with 3 over, into 30 goes 4 with 2 over, into 20 goes 2 with 6 over, and into 60 goes 8 and so on. We see here that 3 and 7 cannot return to 1, whereas 1 is in all numbers. 1 is in 3, but 3 cannot get back to 1 and so on. The universe is built on numbers as Pythagoras taught, but one thing must be added to that. All creation, all of the created universe at whatever level or number, seeks to return to source, seeks to enter into 1 or unity. The Trinity, or 3, seeking to do that is eternal because it always reproduces itself and so remembers itself. The number 7 is also eternal, but in time, and so not in the same sense. It loses itself, and finds its being in a repetition of what is not itself, i.e. in constant repetition of 1, 4, 2, 8, 5 and 7. This diagram is about humanity, and its possibilities, beginning with 7 and the properties of this number in relation to unity. Studying the properties of 7, in relation to unity, we find that they are given by the number 1, 4, 2, 8, 5 and 7. Which by itself means nothing. However, given the framework of the Enneagram, we find it gives rise to an extraordinary relation, extraordinary because of the symmetry of the diagram. Nothing appears symmetrical about the number 1, 4, 2, 8, 5 and 7 by themselves. The only thing we could say about the number is that it repeats itself endlessly in terms of the decimal system, and also contains number 3 or multiples of 3 in it. This is remarkable. The number also has other remarkable properties. However, what it is necessary to grasp in this context is that the created universe seeks by evolution to return to its source, and that all things crave this satisfaction or fulfillment. Everything is deprived, incomplete as a separate creation, and everything seeks completion. Whether an atom, a human body, a planet, a sun, or a galaxy. With regard to absolute unity, we are not merely halved or quartered, but under 48 dividing forces. This reflection is given for those who have already sought to meditate upon the ray of creation. We can then speak of the Holy Ghost, the Trinity within the Enneagram, whereby it is made living. So far we have only spoken of the series ray, me, and so on, which is the law of 7, and of the inner relation of these notes. The points connected by drawing the internal lines between the numbers obtained by dividing 7 into 1, namely the numbers 1, 4, 2, 8, 5 and 7, give a symmetrical figure of great significance. However, 3 positions are not included in the figure, so let's now join those 3 points. A triangle appears, superimposed upon the previous figure, and in symmetrical relation to it at the angles where the numbers 3, 6 and 9 should appear. Notice that this second figure, the triangle, now connecting the points 3, 6 and 9, is not obtained from the relation of 7 to 1, which gives the first figure only and leaves 3, 6 and 9 out. So here is something strange. Two distinct systems, or figures, are obtained that seem to be independent of one another, and yet appear to stand in some symmetrical relation to the diagram as a whole. Examine then the point of the triangle where the number 3 is. It comes between the points indicated by the numbers 2 and 4, which belong to the 7 figure. We could call the symmetrical figure lying between the points 1, 4, 2, 8, 5 and 7, the 7 figure, and the triangle obtained by connecting the points not touched by the 7 figure, a 3 figure. These 2 points 2 and 4 are also indicated by the notes of the octave mi and fa. The law of 7 is sometimes called the law of the shock. If things went in a regular fashion and developed harmoniously without interruption, we would live in a different world. One origin of evil, or of things going all wrong, is due to the law of the shock, or rather to its non-fulfillment. We can reflect here on the teaching of this system about shocks. It is unknown both to science and to older esoteric systems, as far as one can know anything about the latter. Notice here that to reflect is not to dream, and that many mistake dreaming for reflecting. In any series of developments, in every progression, a shock is necessary at a certain point. This point is represented by the places of the semitone intervals in the major scale, between do and si, then between fa and mi. We occupy ourselves at present only with the place of the missing semitone indicated by fa, mi, or mi, fa. If a shock is not given, the direction of development or progress of whatever it is will completely change. We start out to do one thing and end up by doing the opposite. There is no right passage from the state mi to fa without a shock. What follows on mi would not be fa otherwise. So let's illustrate an upright octave, leaving out the do at either end. Compare this with the enneagram and note that the place of shock in the upright octave, marked by a red square, corresponds with that angle of the 3 figure that comes between the numbers 2 and 4, or the notes mi and fa, marked on the circumference of the enneagram. The angle therefore represents in some way a shock entering the system at this point. Since we have an upright octave illustrated here, it is worth pointing out what happens when a 7 figure is applied to it. Looking at this illustration, we get the impression of some living entity, the action of circulation going on. But notice that when put straight, the symmetry of the figure is largely lost. In the enneagram, the octave is structured around a circle, with the circle as a basis for the diagram. What is given then is an approach to the enneagram from different sides. It is useless simply to take it as a diagram. It is a living entity and all life depends upon it. All organized living things have the law of 3 and law of 7 in them. In the case of animals, there is only part of the enneagram, and only one single shock, which will be spoken of later when 2 other shocks are discussed. These can be reached only by humanity on this planet 48, upon which we find ourselves. Another thought can be suggested here that could mean a great deal if reflected upon. Take anything in time that goes by series, and arrange it around the circumference of this diagram. For example, the days of the week going in succession, a series in time. Let's then put Monday opposite the figure 1, at the place called Ray, and Tuesday beside figure 2 or place called Mi, and Wednesday beside figure 4, and so on. This gives us Sunday at the point indicated by the number 9. Now look at the intercourse indicated by the 7 figure between these days. Something passes from Monday to Wednesday, then passes back to Tuesday. Let's try to get rid of the idea of time by means of conceiving the world in higher dimensions, by recognizing that time does not exist, and that everything in succession in time is alive, and is, so to speak, always there. Although we seem to pass from one thing to another. Notice where the shock comes in the series of days marked on the circumference, and notice too the internal circulation that goes on between the days. The objective here is to try to make us think about the enneagram and bring it to some kind of life in our minds, in our directed imagination. Apparently in some way Monday is connected with Wednesday, with what we call the future, but with what, in the 4th dimension it's already there. Then again Wednesday is connected with Tuesday, and Tuesday is connected with Saturday, which seems very extraordinary. This appears to be an unusual way of thinking, quite unconnected with our temporal way of thought about cause and effect, according to which we believe that the present is influenced only by the past. We would all probably agree that we believe the cause of a thing to be anterior in time to the effect. We have no idea that the future can influence the present. If we were however to think that certain things that are to happen on Saturday were in some way connected with what happened on Tuesday, and that as a result what happens to us on Thursday is due to Saturday, which we have not yet reached in time in a series of days, we would certainly be surprised. I would naturally, according to my senses, think that one day follows another, just like that. And that the influences of yesterday act only on today or tomorrow. Yet by deeper reflection we might realize this is not the case, and cease to be so surprised. One might even be willing to think that something they do today may affect them years hence.